Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your brother Zahack Tanvir, and you're watching Candid Talk. And today we will be discussing about a very important subject, and it's all about vaccination or no vaccination. We have been listening to a lot of conspiracy theories, especially in India and Pakistan. And we have been told that, vaccines are not good for us. So to discuss about this topic, we have experts and we have specialized people, and inshallah, they're gonna speak about this subject in detail. And we have very exciting questions, and I believe that you're gonna enjoy this whole discussion. So for this discussion, we have brother Aqib Hussain from Birmingham. He's an independent pharmacist, and we have brother Mazhar. He's a chest specialist, and he's a lung specialist, and we have brother Aqib Hussain. He has done PG Diploma in Genomic Medicine from Cambridge University. So my first question goes to brother Aqib Hussain, and it's about this is a very basic question. This is a very, very basic question. What is a vaccine and how does it work?
Okay, yeah, thank you for the question, Jaafar. So a vaccine, very simply, is a sort of medical intervention where something is introduced to the body to train the immune system in order to be able to recognize a pathogen which causes disease. The way that's been done in the past has been, so for example, giving people an injection of a weakened virus, which then trains their body to be able to fight off that virus. So next time if the active virus enters their body, they can deal with it better. And nowadays, vaccination has expanded and newer technologies have come on. That's one of the things that sort of is involved in the newer COVID-19 vaccines. But vaccination goes back, quite far in history. And I've just mentioned one thing from history. Some of the first people to use vaccination were Muslim Turks. They recognized that having certain sort of cowpox virus entering the body was helpful in warding off smallpox. And they also saw that if people were given a small dose of smallpox, this could help them not to get the full smallpox. And then that was later picked up by Western scientists, Edward Jenner, etc. And developed into the science of vaccination.
It's an interesting stuff. You have mentioned that Muslim Turks were the first people who used vaccination. The first question which comes to our mind when we hear something related to the medical science is the side effects. So I would like to ask Dr. Mazhar about the side effects of the COVID-19 vaccination.
Thank you, Brother Zahack. The side effects are quite common, but they're very mild. So I've had both doses of the vaccine. On each occasion, I had pain in my arm for a couple of days. I was a bit lethargic, a bit tired, a bit of a headache. But within 48 hours, the symptoms had gone. So these are the symptoms people get. So it's very unusual for people to get more serious side effects than that. So very mild side effects are quite common for a large number of people. Okay. One of the things that people have been worried about is the AstraZeneca vaccine. There's been a lot of news, a lot of publicity, a lot of fear, and a lot of fear mongering about the AstraZeneca vaccine. So just to give you some idea, something like 30 million plus people have had the AstraZeneca vaccine. And they've had about 300 cases of people having clots and low platelets. So platelets are little cells which are produced by your bone marrow to help clot. You know, when you bleed, they cause a clot to form. So for some reason, people have a very, very small number of people have had a strange reaction to the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So they form clots, and at the same time, they lose platelets. But we're looking at something in the nature of 1 in 100,000, I think. 1 in 100,000 or, yes, 1 in 100,000 cases. So vanishingly rare, very rare, and less likely with the second dose of the vaccine. And as a result of this, a small number of people have died.
And how about fertility? We have heard, and this is a very common misconception, that vaccine, it affects the male fertility. So what do you have to say about this?
There's no evidence so far to show that, okay? As far as I know. Certainly in the UK now, the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, who are the main professional organization that guides doctors who are dealing with pregnancy and women's issues, they have consulted with an organization called the JCVI, which is the Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunization. So the JCVI, they're the ones who draw up the guidelines. And in collaboration with the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they are now saying that all pregnant women should be vaccinated. Okay, so this fear, I think, of infertility has not been proven.
That's quite interesting. My question to Brother Shoaib, it's commonly said that COVID vaccines are mixed with the swine waste. Is it true that vaccines are mixed with the swine waste? And if that's true, are Muslims supposed to, get that kind of vaccination?
It's a very good question that you've asked. And a lot of the times, certain medical terms which people listen to, they oftentimes will read these big words and think to themselves, I wonder what that means. And then somebody will tell them, well, actually, it means this or that. And I think that the problem comes in with not having any medical training when reading this sort of literature, which leads to conspiracy theories. As you've seen, the discussion so far, so I'm a pharmacist. I'm an independent prescribing pharmacist. You've had two doctors who have just spoken, Dr. Mazhar and Dr. Aqib, who have spoken. If you look at the wording that they used because of their training, they've used very, very specific wording, which I can pick up because my role mainly when I work is to break down the very technical words and explain it to the public in a language that they'll understand. What you'll find is that what I can pick up on, what you might not pick up on, is that the details when they were speaking, they were very careful in saying this has not been proven. Now, somebody might take the fact that it's not proven and say, he didn't deny it. He didn't say, no, it does not cause this 100%. As a medical professional, we are trained to say exact, very carefully constructed things. And I'd like to give an example on that. So if I was to give you an example of a chemical, and a chemical called dihydrogen monoxide. So dihydrogen monoxide, if I told you, if you were to drink dihydrogen monoxide, you will suffer from things like diaphoresis. You'll have micturition. You'll have tissue hydration. And, some auntie on WhatsApp could make a WhatsApp video and share it out that, oh my God, that this has happened. But you'll notice that everybody's laughing. And that's because dihydrogen, two hydrogens, monoxide is H2O, it's water. And diaphoresis is sweating. Micturition is urinating. Of course, if you drink water, you're going to go to the toilet. A tissue hydration is a good thing. And the same thing occurs when it comes to the vaccine. Somebody sees a name that they don't understand. They've seen that name on some other product and they're like, oh, I'm going to put two and two together. This must mean that this is within there. And it's not true. I've seen many theories floating around that that there's pork blood in the virus. There is the cells of a fetus in the virus. If you actually look at the ingredients of one of the vaccine, sorry, I've been saying virus just there, the vaccine. So if you look at the ingredients of a vaccine, you've got more ingredients in a lollipop, but many people are giving lollipops to their children, right? Nobody's got a problem with that. You've got more ingredients in many of the things.
Okay.
So with regards to when you don't know about medical terms, when you don't know about ingredients, when you don't know what these things are, anybody could pick up on these things and say, this actually means something else. there's no pork blood, there's no fetal cells in any of the vaccines. That's not what you're being injected with. So rest assured on that front. But I thought it's important to bring in dihydrogen monoxide as an example there.
So in short, you mean to say that we shouldn't be paying attention to any Tom, Dick, and Harry giving his opinion, and we
absolutely,
should,
absolutely, and we wouldn't in any other part, in any other field. We're talking about your health here, right? We're talking about your life. If we get this wrong, you're going to die, and that's it. You're gone. Your children are going to miss you. This is very important. But when it comes to something like your car, right? We go to the expert, and the expert, the expert will say to you, this is wrong with your car, and I don't know that that's wrong with the car. The mechanic will tell me this is wrong with your car. We need to fix blah 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 in it. Now I think maybe I don't trust this, so I go to a different mechanic. When I go to the different mechanic, he says the same thing. Now, if I go to 3 or 4 mechanics, they all say the same thing, that if I drive my car, it will break down. At that point, what will end up happening is my car will break down. Now, then I turn around and say, this is Toyota's fault, or this is Nissan's fault because, my car broke down. Well, I didn't follow the advice on that. So this is the kind of thing you would follow the advice of even a mechanic when it comes to your car. And if your car breaks down, that's not your life gone. Whereas here, when it comes to this, they try and paint all the medical professionals, all the scientists as some sort of people out to get you. So don't follow their example. And this example was actually given to me by Dr. Mazhar, who's on the panel today.
Okay, let me ask something to Brother Mazhar. Dr. Mazhar, this is a very common question that you get, Pfizer shot and then second dose AstraZeneca. So what is the science behind this? Why doctors suggest to get 1 dose of Pfizer and the second dose of another, something like AstraZeneca or Moderna? So what exactly is the science behind this?
Well, actually, there's 2 separate things here. One is the science and the other is the availability. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the ones that became available here, the ones that are available in the UK, we only have 2. Mm-hmm. One is Pfizer and AstraZeneca, whereas the United States, they've got Pfizer, Moderna, I think Johnson & Johnson. There's you've got, for example, Sputnik in Russia, India. I'm not entirely sure, but China's got Sinovac and CanSino and a number of different things. So it depends on the availability. Okay. So in this country, they were pushing Oxford because the AstraZeneca vaccine, they wanted to do it on a cost sort of basis, sell it at cost, make it at cost so that they didn't make a profit, whereas Pfizer is very expensive. So you have to look at the financial aspects. The Pfizer vaccine is far more expensive than AstraZeneca. So what's happened is it's dependent upon availability. For example, in my own family, some people have had all Pfizer and others have had all AstraZeneca. Another relative of mine had AstraZeneca and couldn't get another AstraZeneca and went to Pfizer. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it depends upon availability. I mean, there was a study, I think it's called the CombiVac study in Spain, which looked at 600 plus people. And they found that actually, for people who had AstraZeneca and then they had the Pfizer vaccine, it was safe to mix and match, to follow AstraZeneca with Pfizer, and it was effective. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the choice has come down to more about availability. Okay. Mm-hmm. Overall, I think probably Pfizer is slightly superior to AstraZeneca. As I said, in the UK, they're suggesting that young people who've had the AstraZeneca vaccine, or who actually were vaccine naive, should try and get Pfizer as opposed to AstraZeneca because of the very, very small problem with clots I mentioned earlier. I mean, maybe Aqib would want to talk a little bit about the difference in the vaccines, but essentially, Pfizer and Moderna are mRNA vaccines. So these are novel vaccines which have been developed in the last year or so. The AstraZeneca vaccine is a more traditional route. So what they did was they took a vaccine from a chimpanzee vaccine, an adenovirus, which was inert, and they put the spike on it. Okay, because the body's immune system recognizes the spike or the antigen and produces antibodies. Okay, but when you look at it, sorry to get too technical, but really when you look at it holistically on a mass scale, the difference between these vaccines is very small. So if I had available, I got the Pfizer vaccine, but if the Pfizer vaccine wasn't available to me and it was just Oxford, I would have gone with Oxford.
Okay. Okay, so in continuation to what Dr. Mazhar mentioned, I would like to ask Dr. Aqib that, yesterday, I think WHO Chief Scientist, Soumya Subramanian, she said about mixing the vaccines. Okay, she advised against, mixing the vaccines, and she said that citizens or the public should not take this decision into their hands, and this should be left to the public authorities, public health authorities. So what do you suggest from the medical point of view? Because I heard that a lot of people are deciding themselves that what vaccine they should take first, the second dose, what they should take, and third dose, what they should take. So what exactly, you need to say from the medical point of view?
Jazakallah khair. That's an interesting question. I wasn't aware of the WHO statement that you mentioned, but there, as Dr. Mazhar mentioned, there's been some ongoing research about mixing and matching of different vaccines, and as he said, some of that is down to availability of the vaccines, but some of it is also is also down to actual efficacy as well. And so there's been some studies in America, for example, where they've shown that there's increased efficacy against COVID from having two different types of vaccine. So having an mRNA vaccine as one of the doses and then adenovirus vaccine as another dose, this kind of gives you a more broad immunity. Now, as human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's revealed to a certain amount of knowledge, and there's a vast amount of knowledge which is hidden from us. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. He doesn't give us, anything of his knowledge except that he wills. So until very recently, we had no idea how the immune system worked, and we're still just at a baby level trying to understand how the immune system works. We've discovered antibodies, we've discovered sort of different types of immune cells that help us fight off diseases. So we've basically developed some systems like vaccines, which train antibodies and which train certain cells in our immune system to fight off invading bacteria, invading viruses, etc. The way that they work is very, very complex, more complex than we understand. So the mRNA vaccines, they stimulate one type of immune response. And the adenovirus vaccines, they stimulate another type of response. Although they are both targeted at the same spike protein of the coronavirus, the COVID-19, or rather the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID-19. They still cause slightly different effects in the immune system, slightly different ways that the immune system responds. So the immune system doesn't only use antibodies, it also uses T cells. So because of that, if you imagine you're giving the body an mRNA vaccine, the immune system recognizes that and mounts some kind of response to that. That response is very subtly different to the response it may mount to the AstraZeneca type of vaccine, the adenovirus Sinovac vaccines. So the idea is that actually giving one followed by another helps your body make a more broad response to all SARS-CoV-2 variants as well. So there's some evidence coming out that is the case, and I think Mazhar mentioned as well the Spanish study that showed the same as well. So that's why there are some health authorities who are advising that you can mix and match some of the vaccines. So there's no point, for example, mixing some of them. There's no point taking Pfizer first and then Moderna second, because both Pfizer and Moderna, the spike protein mRNA is exactly the same. The only difference is in the capsule that it's administered in that gets inside the cells. But once it's in the cell, the way that it produces the spike protein and the exact spike protein that's produced is the same. So you won't get a difference. But with the adenovirus, you will train something slightly different, even though it's against the same spike protein. So these things basically need to be looked at by the specialists, and they need to be investigated at each step. That's why people shouldn't take this into their own hands. I just mentioned two things in relation to this. One is that, from our own perspective, all of us here are Muslim professionals. We're talking mainly to a Muslim audience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us in the Quran to be careful how we take our information, especially on very, very important issues, as Shoaib alluded to earlier. And in Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to us, وَإِذَا جَاءَهُمْ أَمْرٌ مِّنَ الْأَمْنِ أَوِ الْخَوْفِ أَذَاعُوا بِهِ وَلَوْ رَدُّوهُ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ وَإِلَى أُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْهُمْ لَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنبِطُونَهُ مِنْهُمْ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, when there comes to them some matter which touches public safety or fear, they spread it, they make it known among the people. If only they had referred it to the messenger or to those who have been charged with authority among them, the proper investigators would have understood it from them directly. So this is very important. This thing, الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنبِطُونَهُ مِنْهُمْ. The proper investigators, they are the competent authorities that are given authority to look into these affairs on a societal level. Yeah, so this is the people that we need to look for advice. Don't start trying to do things yourself because of one thing you read here and another thing you read there. And one example I'll give in relation to this, I can see Dr. Mazhar's got his hand up. I'll give one example of this, which is that at the beginning of the pandemic, you will have all have heard of the hydroxychloroquine misinformation that went around. Now, there's a lot really that can be unpacked about that whole issue. But one of the things that we saw happening in America was that a version of hydroxychloroquine is actually sold in pet shops for people to put into their fish tanks. And so people started taking this fish tank medication and poisoning themselves, trying to save themselves from COVID. They killed themselves drinking a toxic solution that's meant to go in a fish tank just because it contains some hydroxychloroquine. So if you had proper medical hydroxychloroquine, that wouldn't have happened. But because people are trying a DIY approach, and if people, I think the World Health Organization is probably trying to warn people from having a DIY approach to getting vaccinated, especially in countries where it may be possible to buy it privately.
I will come to Dr. Mazhar later. I know that he raised the hand. I have an interesting question to ask him, but before that, let me switch to Brother Shoaib. Brother Shoaib, let me ask you a very non-technical question. Two questions. First thing is that we have heard that, Yahudi, Zionists, they don't get vaccinated. And they are planning that only Muslims should get vaccinated so that they can get rid of the Muslims. Okay. First thing, this is a very common thing. The Maulanas in India and Pakistan, they have been speaking out loud about this. So I want you to clear this first. What about the Zionists? Because I read and I heard that Israel is the first country who vaccinated their people. Okay. So we need to know about this first. The second thing is that, second question, I'll come to you, inshallah. But first, let us hear about this.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And it touches upon what Dr. Aqib was just saying about misinformation and that spreading with misinformation. We come from a religion of evidence. Yeah, unfortunately, within our community, we see time and time again misinformation spread on WhatsApp, on Facebook, elsewhere. And oftentimes, you just need to add the point in that this is America ka virus hai, or some words like that. This is a Yehudi vaccine, or this is a British thing, or European this, or and all of a sudden people start getting worried. I know you mentioned Israel. I'll mention America. A lot of people say about, this is an American thing and this is an American thing. The phones we're talking on, the Zoom we're using is Zoom.us, right? That's made in America as well. And the phones we're using, most of the technology is made in America. The internet we're using to speak to each other was developed in the States. Most of these are made by non-Muslims, yet we're very happy to use them. But when it comes to the certain advice, which is completely independent of foreign policy or anything like that, we all of a sudden start getting worried. And you're absolutely right. One of the examples in this is, for example, Fox News, Sky News, they raised some concerns about the number of people who are dying from COVID, and they kind of questioned it, which a lot of Muslims then peddled and said, "Oh, not many people are dying from COVID." Fox News kind of did a similar thing as well. Yet the owner of Fox News and Sky News, Rupert Murdoch, was one of the first people to get the vaccine. And the way he did it, because he's actually Australian and he lives in America a lot of the time, he flew in specially to a town near London, and he stayed in London, totally socially distancing from everybody, even his staff. And he was alone in a room. And they went to he went to a doctor's surgery. So in the UK, because the UK was one of the first countries to roll out the vaccine program, and he got himself vaccinated. So you have to look at the kind of stories which are there to just make people hyped and to get something viral, and the stories which are the reality, which is that the people who know about what the virus can do are getting vaccinated. And this idea, you're absolutely right, that we do have this idea that that America is doing this thing, or Israel is doing this thing, and we see this spread around quite a lot. On that point, what I would say that I just want to touch upon one thing there. The consequences in the religion is what Dr. Aqib just mentioned. You're accountable before Allah when these misinformation you're spreading. Just practically though, you're causing death, and you're not causing death of some random person who you'll never meet, and you won't feel that guilt. Your parents, your grandparents, your uncles and your aunties. Many times we've seen so many people not get vaccinated because they're worried, about, oh, the vaccine might contain something and they might have a side effect, and maybe they might get a blood clot because one in, I don't know how many, Dr. Mazhar said, how many people had this blood clot, which is a tiny amount. Those same people who didn't get their parents vaccinated, their parents then died from the virus. It just pointed out that Dr. Aqib just pointed out it's 1 in 100,000, whereas if you just compare that figure, so these people who are oftentimes saying this and they're just sharing these things, if you are, there was a research done, there was somebody by the name of David Spiegelhalter. Now he studies public understanding of risk at Cambridge University, the university which Dr. Aqib also went to. And he calculated the risk of COVID death. And the risk which he calculated is if you are 65 years old, you're 100 times more likely to die from COVID than if you are 25 years old. So these people who are spreading the conspiracy theories at 25 or in that age group of being young, and they're just spreading everything everywhere and saying, I got COVID, I was fine. But their parents or their grandparents are the people who are feeling the consequences and dying as a result of contracting the virus. And this is the real to have blood on your hands. You don't have to, like before, shoot somebody or stab somebody. You just have to forward a wrong misinformation video on WhatsApp. You just have to share something incorrect on Facebook, and you've possibly caused someone's death. So it's very important to think about the importance of misinformation and this kind of culture that we have.
That's right. You're absolutely right. Let me ask Dr. Mazhar. It's commonly thought that usually when vaccines are produced, it goes through a lot of process and lots of stages. But COVID vaccine, it came out instantly within a short period of time. So is it safe? Because usually it goes through a lot of trials and ifs and buts, but in this case it just came out. So so for this reason, a lot of people raise speculations that COVID vaccine is not safe. So what do you have to say about this? Would you please unmute?
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
If we look at this from a global perspective, if we ignore the vaccine for a moment, if we look at technology in our own lifetime, all of us, I remember when I was a kid, you had 3 and then 4 TV channels in the UK, and it's like, wow, we've had a 4th TV channel, right? Now, when I tell that to my kids, they're like, what? Hundreds of TV channels, every type of, Twitter, Instagram, every type of social media platform you can imagine. Okay, and this has happened within my life. So this development in science and technology in the vaccine is not this is not an isolated thing. This is a phenomenon that's happened in the last 50 years. If you look at the speed of technological acceleration, the way things are just accelerating, really at a blistering speed. This is not just isolated to vaccines. This is across the piece. Okay, so in the same way, medical, right across the board, medical technology, some of the advances now. I mean, I've been a doctor now, mashallah, 30 years, and I look at the things that are happening now, and I'm awestruck. Breathtaking changes. So this development of the vaccine for people like me, it's still amazing, but it doesn't fill me with disbelief. It fills me with admiration. Okay, so before, what they used to do was they would do development and implementation. What they've done, there's been a global collaboration. Okay, the best scientists right across the world. So instead of developing and then implementing, they've done development implementation at the same time, simultaneously, and this has allowed things to happen very, very quickly. And also, they've had experience with coronavirus, different types of coronavirus in the last 20 years. They had SARS in 2002. And they had MERS in your region, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, which is also coronavirus, in 2012. So they had a head start in the development of these vaccines. Okay, so there's a lot of conspiracy about it, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it, this just reflects the global trends in technological advance, and medicine is also part of that. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded, but I'm just trying to put it into context.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Jazakallah. I have a very, important question for Dr. Aqib Hussain. When you are told that if you get vaccinated, then virus will not going to affect you. So you're educating people about this. But let me give you my case. I got Pfizer shot in Ramadan. And then just 1 month ago, I was infected with COVID-19, and I was home quarantined for 14 days. So a lot of my relatives and my friends were asking me, and this was their first question, that you're vaccinated and how come you caught the virus? So how does this COVID vaccine work? This is the first question. How does it work in any way? And if even after getting vaccinated, you're getting infected, so what's the point of getting vaccination?
Really good question, and I'm glad to hear that you've recovered well after catching COVID, and you look well now, alhamdulillah. I think what's important to say about this is that people, I think, don't understand what vaccines are meant to do. And they got maybe taken up a little bit with the hype around the vaccines when they first came out. So the vaccines are not supposed to prevent somebody from ever sort of contracting the virus, the infection, and or to stop the transmission completely. Okay, what they are meant to do is to mitigate against severe disease. Okay, so that's the primary outcome that was sort of wanted from the vaccines, is that they train your immune system to fight off the infection before it gets anyone severely sick or dies. Right? And even on that, no vaccine can do that 100%. Okay, so if you imagine that, that's the aim of the vaccine. The aim of the vaccine is to stop people getting severe illness and to stop people dying. Now, that is not going to be 100% ever. However, what was, alhamdulillah, a happy sort of outcome from the first trials on the vaccine, the first implementation of the vaccine, was that against the original wild Wuhan strain of the virus, or the Wuhan variant rather, the vaccines actually prevented not just severe disease and death, but they to very high levels, so near the high 90%. But actually, they also stopped people even becoming infected in the first place. Okay. That the immune system was trained so well, and the response that was mounted was so strong that people, if they were exposed to the virus, they fought the virus off before it had an ability to establish itself in any of their cells, and to sort of and then beyond that, to being able to be transmitted from that person to other people. So this worked against the wild type. This also worked against the alpha strain, or the Kent strain, the variant rather, and we saw a fantastic response from that here in the UK. That as soon as the vaccine program was implemented, the people that had even one dose of the vaccine, they weren't catching it and they weren't transmitting it either, let alone getting ill and dying. And this actually carried on for a while. It's only now with the Delta variant, the so-called Indian variant, that this variant has got more vaccine escape than other variants. So this variant, this is able to infect people who've been doubly vaccinated, and to make them become symptomatic as well. Okay, and that also means that they can spread it to others as well, and that's been seen. Numerous studies. The first studies of that were in Singapore, but they are still working very well in preventing serious illness requiring hospitalization and in deaths. Right. So if we look right now in the UK, today we had nearly 50,000 new cases of coronavirus. The last time we had 50,000 new cases of coronavirus was at or near the peak of the last wave. And Dr. Mazhar will sort of concur with this, that our hospitals were full. But right now the hospitals are not full. There still are people coming in now in greater numbers, but they're nowhere near full. Okay, so the vaccines are doing a great job, alhamdulillah, still, right? There's a lot of escape with the new Delta variant. It therefore means that we still need to take precautions, but it's doing when people ask the question, what's the point of taking it? The point of taking it is that it massively reduces risks to people of becoming severely ill, requiring hospitalization, and of dying. And that is good enough, to be honest. And that's what all vaccines aim to do. And so far, COVID vaccines have done better than expected. Inshallah, it seems that with the third dose, we may be able to even get to the stage where people do not even become symptomatic with Delta and don't actually transmit Delta either.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for responding and clarifying the doubts. Our question now to Dr. Mazhar. Getting vaccinated, when we talk about getting vaccinated, how safe it is for the pregnant women to get vaccinated? First question. And second is, here in Saudi Arabia, children between 12 and 16, they are also getting vaccinated so that they can start going to schools. So you think this is a kind of safe strategy to, vaccinate children? So what's your take on that?
Okay, so first thing, I have managed myself some pregnant women who got COVID-19. Yeah. So I've seen cases where the child died or the mother died. These are otherwise fit and healthy young women. Okay. So we had a case of a woman who got COVID when she was pregnant. So she wasn't vaccinated. We sent her to a different hospital to put her on something called ECMO. And ECMO is a machine that you connect when you, so ordinarily when somebody needs to go to intensive care, they put a tube down their throat and they connect them to a machine and ventilate them. If you can't get enough oxygen, then what you have to do is you have to put oxygen directly into the bloodstream. Okay, this is only done in a few places in the UK. Okay, so this is the sort of measure of extreme resort. It's the last thing you can possibly do. Okay, and that woman died, and her baby survived. Okay, and I've seen cases where the baby died and the mother was very sick. Okay, so at the minute, as far as I know, we don't know the actual risk for pregnant women. But as I mentioned to you earlier, our Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, who are the professional body that oversees women's health, And the committee I mentioned about earlier, the JCVI, the committee to do with vaccination and immunization, have both recommended that pregnant women have the vaccine. Okay, so there was some trepidation early on. People held back, but now the recommendation, as of I think a couple of months ago, they're now saying all pregnant women should be vaccinated. Okay, so I don't know the long-term safety of it, but I have seen the opposite, where pregnant women have had, and it's horrifying. You know, subhanAllah, it's horrible. When you see a pregnant woman, then you're thinking, what do we do? Do we save the baby? Do we save the mum? You know, you have to make a choice sometimes. Yeah. So that was horrific. And then I know that a lot of my colleagues were really shaken by that. That was really, really horrific, you know. So I would say, to save one example like that, okay, so the vaccines may have consequences with pregnant women and with their babies, but we know if you don't have the vaccine, the consequences can be disastrous, okay? The second thing about children, I don't know about evidence, but clearly what happens is, Aqib and Shoaib mentioned earlier, that, you know, children are probably less likely, children and adolescents, to become ill, and they're more likely to be asymptomatic, and they're more likely to shake it off. But kids who don't have the vaccine are much more likely to spread it to their elders. You know, in our Muslim communities, you have multi-generational living, you have parents, you have nan-ke, dad-ke, etc. So there's an increased risk, and the kids bring it in, okay? So I think from that point of view, I think it's a reasonable thing to do. Certainly it's been passed in Canada, the UK, the United States. In Canada, it was the first country in the world from kids from the age of 12 to 15. Then America followed for adolescents, and then the UK started. My own sons were 17 and 19. My two younger sons have both had both doses of the vaccine, and they've been fine. And the other thing that we haven't touched upon, which is going to be a big, big problem worldwide, is the problem of long COVID. So long COVID is a condition where people will have symptoms for at least 12 weeks, okay? And people can have debilitating symptoms, and we don't know what to do with it, okay? We, as respiratory, as a chest physician like myself, me and my colleagues, we run long COVID clinics. We don't know what to do with these. And I think Aqib mentioned in a WhatsApp chat with me earlier that there are at least 200 symptoms that can happen because of long COVID. So, you know, even young people, you can have a lifelong disease. You may survive, but for 40 or 50 years, you've got a disease. And so I think personally, I think it's something that should happen.
Jazakallah khair. I would like to ask one more question. Since you're a lung specialist, Brother Afid, you want to say something?
Sorry, I just wanted to back up one thing for the public. Dr. Mazhar mentioned that his two children, aged 19 and 17, have had the vaccine, double vaccine. Me too. My eldest children, 19 and 17, they've both had both doses of the vaccine as well. You know, we've taken it ourselves. We've given it to all the members of our family. We've given it to our children that are eligible as well.
Okay, Dr. Mazhar, since you're a lung specialist and you have been dealing with a lot of chest-related cases, we have heard, but we're not sure about this. It's commonly spread that the smokers, you know, those people who smoke cigarettes, it's said that their lungs, they get trained to, fight such things. And when they get infected with COVID, so their lungs will be trained enough to handle COVID.
SubhanAllah, some of this stuff is really funny. You know, smoking, you know, there's at least 50 different diseases that smoking causes. So many different types of cancer. Smoking has nothing going for it, including COVID. People who smoke are much more likely to do badly than people who don't smoke. Because smoking affects your immune response, okay? Treatments are less likely to work in smokers. So this is just wishful thinking for people who want to continue smoking. Complete nonsense.
Brother Shoaib, question to you. Some doctors, and in fact some medical professionals, they have said that vaccine doesn't work, or they have questioned the seriousness of the virus. So what about these experts? And in fact, some of the doctors, they have even said that you need to focus on your immune system. So if you focus on your immune system, and you should train your body in such a way that they should fight COVID. So no need to get vaccinated. Just train your body, train your immune system. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a brilliant question. So what I would say to people is to look at the example of people such as Instagram stars, such as Belle Gibson, who recently was caught, and she was promoting healthy living. And on the face of it, it doesn't look like there's anything negative in what she was promoting. She was saying, we need to have wellness. You need to eat organic. You need to eat fresh, and you need to do this. And she claimed that she had got over a brain tumor and several cancers just through healthy living. And what's been found out now years after, even though her app was accepted by the Apple App Store, which is known for vetting these types of things, her books were published by Penguin Publishing, which is a reputable publisher. Despite this, because she wasn't a medical professional, and she wasn't backed up by these regulatory bodies, which we are backed up by, she was found out to be a complete liar. She never had a brain tumor. People started questioning, how come, you look like totally healthy. How come you look so healthy, yet somehow you're suffering from cancer? And people who were suffering from cancer looked dreadful and felt even worse about themselves. People lost their parents and their close relatives because they started following what Belle Gibson had been saying. And because of that, then they lost these people. And now they're out for blood against her. The same thing happens with COVID. When COVID was newly had come out, one of the chiropractors, a chiropractor basically in India, you could say a massage wala or something like that, hadiyon ko theek karne wala or something like that, right? They really, I've been to a chiropractor. They know where your pain is. They know how to massage you with that and take the cracks out. And they are really good at that. But what they don't know about is epidemiology or virology. And this one certain chiropractor was going around, masquerading, wearing a lab coat and making videos saying, first he started off with 5G. 5G, I'm not saying 5G causes the virus, but it causes the calcium gated channels to open up, which would cause blah, blah, blah. And, he had this theory. That theory was proven to be complete rubbish. He never apologized. Neither did any of the people who shared this on Facebook and WhatsApp and everywhere. And so many people who were going around burning 5G towers and talking about 5G. Similarly, when people like this individual said that wearing a mask causes hypoxia, where you don't get enough oxygen into your lungs, and surgeons pointed out that they spend their whole day, wearing masks and nothing happens to their oxygen levels. And he was claiming that, that you would swallow some plastics and you wouldn't have enough oxygen, which would cause this and that. Similarly, there was a claim that doctors are getting paid or are in the pocket of the government. And if anybody, says anything about, for example, doctors getting paid, we know that within the UK anyway, doctors were heavily opposed to many steps by the government. And I can see Dr. Mazhar's hands raised. Just one point before I give way. What I would say about this is that for example, give an example using the religion, because we're all Muslims here. So people would look at, for example, my beard and think that I'm a mufti or an expert in the religion. I'm not. And they will come and they will ask you questions. And just like we have a beard problem within our community, for example, where people see your beard and say, I need to know this masala, I need to know that masala. And one guy will give you a totka where he'll say, you go off and read this many times and rub this on yourself and you'll be fine. And we know that it doesn't help your akhirah, it doesn't help your dunya either. In the same way, these types of so-called experts have said this. And there's people with genuine qualifications as well, but they are not experts in epidemiology. They're not experts in virology. And on that point, they're not even respiratory consultants like Dr. Mazhar, who I'll give way to now.
Jazakallah khair for speaking. And I think, Dr. Mazhar, you want to add some point here.
Yeah, I think Shoaib summed that up beautifully. Just a couple of points. Like Shoaib said, the last point about being a mufti, we have like a famous mufti type person in Birmingham. So just because someone is a Hafiz Quran and they may know Arabic and they may know Usul al-Fiqh and all sorts of things, despite them having more knowledge than an kind of a lay person than myself, I know enough not to take my religion from him. Okay. By the same token, just because you have a very, very small group of motley doctors, one Pakistani and an Irish person and a few Germans in the this motley crew, and you can fit them into this living room of mine here. Okay. You couldn't fill my house with them. So you have these kind of quacks, I have to say. Just because you've got a small group pretending they're legitimate, the vast, body of doctors. Now, in England, you may have 15, 20 people like this. You have 250,000 doctors in the UK. So why is it not a majority of people saying what these people say? And as Shoaib said, if I, as a chest physician, started prescribing antipsychotic drugs that Aqib does, I can expect to find myself in front of my professional body, the General Medical Council, and they may strip me of being a doctor. They may say, who gave you the right to prescribe antipsychotic medication? And similarly, they may say to Aqib, if he tries to put a camera into someone's lungs, because he's a doctor and something goes wrong, he hasn't got a leg to stand on. So by the same token, these people, they should really stay in their lane and they shouldn't talk about issues they have no knowledge, when there are thousands of people in the UK who've got far more knowledge than them on this topic.
You're absolutely right. Dr. Mazhar, the problem here is that social media. So everybody, every Tom, Dick, and Harry got the TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp. So every single person, every dumb person got the tongue to speak. So everybody's spreading all kinds of, idiotic stuff and nonsense. And in fact, this is creating a kind of depression among the people, and especially our nannies and daddies and aunties who are at home, using WhatsApp. If they go through these kind of things, they get into kind of depression. And I believe that during this lockdown and pandemic situation, a lot of people, they went through depression, and it has indeed affected their mental health. So I believe Dr. Aqib can answer this question about the pandemic situation and how it affected the mental health of the people.
Thank you, Brother Zahack. This question is often brought up, and as a specialist in mental health, I find it a bit frustrating at times the way it's framed. There's no doubt that there's been a lot of mental health implications brought about because of the pandemic. A lot of those are due to the fact that there is a pandemic. Most of us never expected this to happen in our life. No one expected to see the things that we've seen. Us versus Muslims, did we ever expect to see the Kaaba empty? Nobody doing tawaf. There was shocking scenes. So, this in and of itself, just the presence of a dangerous virus going around the world, shutting everything down by the leave of Allah, this itself causes mental health anxieties and problems to people. Okay. Then there's been the necessary responses by governments to this. So, like China, for example, they were even sort of bolting people into their houses. They were shutting apartment buildings to stop people coming out of them. Yeah. Other countries did different things to, obviously all of them to a lesser degree, but everybody did some response. Some did no response and ended up with people dying in the streets, like in India, recently. So all of those responses, they also had their own effects on people's mental health as well. And then, countries like our own here, the UK, there's been an extended lockdown. It's had an effect on people's livelihoods, on their jobs, on their finances. It's had an effect on people, their social support networks. You're not able to see your family. You're not able to see your friends as much as normal. So all of it has had a big effect on people's mental health. Now, I think that's globally. I could talk more specifically about what's going on locally. But I find it, as I say, I find it a bit frustrating in the way it's framed, that this is somehow framed as an argument against taking actions to control the pandemic. It's as if it's not the pandemic that's caused the problems or the problems to worsen, but it's the response. But that's not the case. And there's Mazhar and Shoaib will know and understand more what I'm saying, but a lot of this stuff comes from the right wing. and from sort of conservative quarters, these are people who never cared about people's mental health in the first place. So where did they suddenly become such caring people about mental health? They spent the last 10 years stripping away all the funding for mental health, reducing the number of nurses and doctors. They've reduced the number of hospitals. They've reduced the number of services that are available. They've reduced the specialist services that used to be available for mental health here. So I find it very, very frustrating when they come out with, the reason why we're doing X, Y, Z is nothing to do with financial reasons. It's mental health. We suddenly care about mental health when they haven't cared about mental health before. So I find, this discussion is important, but it's framed very wrongly currently.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And something related to the mental health. We were told that we shouldn't be touching each other. We should be doing the social distancing. So people were devoid of, human touch. So, Dr. Aqib, do you think that because of this, a lot of people went into depression because of no human touch? People got into depression.
I think what's been noted by mental health services generally, there's been a big burden of mental health problems in the pandemic. I think what you're saying, that the human touch definitely has a part to play. There's some research that things like a hug, etc., even just a handshake between yourself and those people that you care about, friends, family, etc. Those affect your mood positively. But at the same time, there's what's been noted is that for some people, it's actually what's happened has been more helpful for their mental health. So some people have a lot of anxieties generally about sort of their day-to-day life as it used to be, and now they're actually finding things a lot better. They're spending a lot more time exercising, or they're spending a lot more time out in nature. So people have actually noted that there's a mixed bag, and certainly even me as a mental health specialist, I remember having a discussion partway through the pandemic on a sort of professional meeting similar to this, and some of us were reporting that we found it very stressful. Others were saying that they've had a really good experience because of lockdown. So I think it's quite a mixed bag, but definitely what you mentioned about social contact, social support is so important to us as human beings. It definitely does have an effect.
Mm-hmm. That's quite interesting. Thank you so much. I think now I have a question for Brother Shoaib. Brother Shoaib, it's commonly said that the vaccines are made just to make money. So what do you have to say? Since you're into the pharmacy business, you think it's all about money? What do you have to say?
A very good question. So the first thing is that the most of the medication that anybody will take, most of those medications, pharmaceutical companies are making a lot of money from them. That's the first thing that we need to appreciate. That nobody stops taking their metformin for diabetes, or their furosemide, or any ramipril, or anything that they're on, because someone might be making money off this. But the beauty of this is that actually I looked into this because I looked into the share price of Pfizer and AstraZeneca, and it slumped when you would expect that they've just created a vaccine. That vaccine has basically seen a really good response as well. You'd expect their share price to go really high, but in fact it had gone down. So I looked into the reason of why, and that's because they're not actually making money from it. And Dr. Mazhar actually touched on this earlier as well, that there's been some of the companies, I'm not sure whether it's completely across the board, but some of the companies have made absolutely zero profit from the vaccine. So this is not a concern.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Mazhar, we have a question that while talking about the Indian vaccines, it's usually said that Indian vaccines are safe. And what's your take on this? Is it safe to take the Indian vaccines?
It depends what you mean, Zahack, because India, up until the problems at the end of last year, was making vaccines for export. So India was producing more vaccines than anybody else in the world, and perhaps neglecting their own population. So I don't know if it's, for example, foreign vaccines that they've got a license to produce. I'm sure they produce very good vaccines. About their own vaccines, I don't know. I know, as I said earlier, I know a little bit about the Russian and the Chinese, but I don't know anything about Indian vaccines, so I can't comment. But they've obviously got the skill to make vaccines for foreign sort of, big pharma. So they've got the skill, but I don't know about India's own sort of indigenous home developed vaccines.
I think I could maybe make a comment in relation to that. One of my colleagues from India was telling me about the India's own manufactured vaccines, and I think I would come back to just saying, look, if the responsible authorities they're very specialized. They produce very good medical professionals. They produce medication for most of the world. If they okay something at a sort of high level and it's okayed by the medical bodies there, I would go with it. And I've heard from these colleagues of mine who are well connected, quite senior, that the Indian vaccine, especially the sort of viral vector vaccine that was made by India itself, is actually quite good.
Okay. Brother Shoaib. Brother Shoaib, this question is related to fake news. Every time we come across fake news about vaccination, about medicines, about this and that. So what do you think? How can we confront this fake news?
So with fake news, we've seen fake news have detrimental effects across many different areas. So what I would say is the first thing is look at where you're getting your reports from. If, for example, you are getting a report from an absolute random website that just has no regulation to it, it has absolutely no, it's not known at all to any regulatory body or anything. It's just a blog that's been set up. It's likely that this is probably going to be speaking nonsense. And that's the case with other types of fake news as well. I mean, we've seen, as you know, I write on Muslim World Journal. We see time and time again fake news around things like, Saudi Arabia did this. And then you look into it and you actually find that some blogger just came up with this news story just for some political reason, some political opposition to the country. And he's put it out there. And you'll see very big blogs who will retweet it or push it out. It's the same thing with fake news as well. And as I'm sure Dr. Aqib and Dr. Mazhar will be able to tell you as well, within the medical profession, things are very, very tightly regulated. You can't publish something just because of opinion, because you think something. Things are checked quite significantly before they're published, and these things are constantly under review as well.
That's quite interesting. Thank you so much. And I believe that we have crossed about 1 hour, alhamdulillah, and the discussion was going very interestingly smooth. Alhamdulillah, we have enjoyed a lot. And I would like all the guests to make the final point so that we can wind up this discussion, inshallah. Beginning with Dr. Aqib.
Jazakallah. I suppose I'll just bring this back to the Quranic advice that when it comes to issues of public safety, issues that cause public fear, consternation, etc., it's very, very important that, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, that we return them back to the messenger, we return them back to the people in authority, and those people that have the proper qualifications, that are the proper investigators. They come up, they look at what's been given to them, and they come up with a position statement, they come up with advice in relation to that. It's very, very easy. We've seen this throughout the pandemic. We've had such really silly things now if we look back at them. At the beginning, everyone was saying it's 5G. And people now act like they never said that. Then we had people coming up with, there's worms inside the masks. Do you guys remember that one? Just came to my mind earlier. Then people came out with the vaccine is causing my arm to become magnetic. There's so many things that have just kept on coming. And this is as Muslims, we should have been immunized by our religion against this, against the viral spread of misinformation. Our deen has inoculated us against this by teaching us the principles. But unfortunately, our community is the most susceptible to them. And there's a real need, I think, to say to people, fear Allah. Really fear Allah. Like the Prophet ﷺ told us that it's enough for a person to be considered a liar, that they spread everything that they hear. But this is what we see again and again and again. Somebody receives, I just had literally while we're sitting here right now, I've had somebody forward to me a little box saying there's been this many thousand deaths after the vaccine, according to this vaccine yellow card reporting system. You don't understand what that system is. You don't understand how that system works. You can't take raw data in any field. Nobody. I'm not a physicist. I can't take raw data from a physics experiment and then run and make a conclusion. It needs years of expertise and study, and it needs wisdom, it needs experience before somebody can do that. This is just the same, and unfortunately, I think all of this has only exposed a problem that was already there in our community. Mm-hmm. We let people who set themselves up as being Sunnah remedy practitioners. So-and-so is a Raqi, so-and-so is a hijama therapist, so-and-so sells honey, so-and-so sells black seed oil. Suddenly this person's, more qualified than somebody like Dr. Mazhar, who's got 30 years experience and is a respiratory consultant. Oh. We allowed these people without being challenged to embed themselves in our society. And then a crisis has come along and they've actually harmed people. They've actually caused death. Shoaib mentioned something earlier, and I just want to mention this as my last thing. We had somebody that we know, they didn't get their parent vaccinated. Their one surviving parent, they didn't get them vaccinated because they believed that the vaccines would do something to them. She was an old lady. The vaccine's not going to do anything to her. It's not going to stop her having kids. She's already had her kids. She's probably at more risk of having a blood clot from sitting down anyway than she would ever be from the vaccine, right? There's all these other health problems. The vaccine for her was so safe. Unfortunately, she caught COVID at a time when people who are vaccinated are not catching COVID and not becoming ill. And she died was it 2 weeks ago, Shoaib? She died a horrendous death. She died, suffering and in pain in her last week. And it was totally unavoidable. And people like this, they think that they can just say things and it doesn't affect real world outcomes, but it does. And so I just come back to everybody should fear Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who told us that we should take news in a certain way, that we should take things back to the people of authority, the people who are qualified, the people who are specialists in an area. And, we're not doing that. And until we do that, we're going to have more problems. The next crisis is going to come along. We're going to have the same problem. So that's my final thought to you. So
that's the main concern these days. And you have really made valid points. I think we can move on to Dr. Mazhar. Dr. Mazhar, we would like to hear your concluding points.
Zahack, I echo 100% what Aqib's just said. And just to add another ayah, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ ذِكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. And this is such a beautiful principle. If I need legal advice, I go to a lawyer. If I need advice about my accounts, I go to an accountant. But for some reason, people pick and choose when it comes to medics. I will have Muslim patients who will want everything done in terms of treatment, but they will draw a line. When it comes to the vaccine, we trust you in everything, but we don't trust you in this. You can't have it both ways. And like Shoaib mentioned earlier about the mechanic, you can't go to the mechanic and say, fix my brakes, okay, but I don't trust you when it comes to the handbrake. What the mechanic's going to say, get out my garage. But this is the way people are behaving with us. And the really sad thing is, I can think of cases of in our own community, patients who become very, very sick in the first wave, very close to death, and then their own first-degree relatives will not have the vaccine, because they say, no, we should just let it run through the community. And you think, well, hang on a minute. Last year, your relative was so close to death, and you were contacting me, are they going to make it? Are they going to make it? And yet you've forgotten that your relative nearly died, but somehow you're going to be immune from any effects of not having the vaccine. At the minute, I have recently had a patient come in who didn't have the vaccine. And after many weeks of trying to keep him with a mask, trying to give him enough oxygen, they decided to put him to sleep and put a tube down. Now, I think the chance of him ever waking up is virtually zero. Completely unnecessary. His wife is going to become a widow. His kids are going to become yatim. Why? Completely unnecessary. Then he's going to have to stand in front of Allah. His wife became a yatim. His wife became beva, and his kids became yatim for what? Because I'm not going to have the vaccine. I'm going to be fine. Well, then you have to live with the consequences. And it's, it becomes, sometimes you think we have to look after these people. And it's very emotionally, physically draining on people like us, because you're wearing that PPE. You're trying to turn these people around. They may be younger than me in many cases. And you put so much of yourself into this. And you think this man could, or this woman, they could have avoided the situation they put themselves in. It's like, don't throw yourself into destruction to bring another ayah. This is like throwing yourself into destruction, if you ask me. So that's really all I have to say. And I wish our community would realize this is a very serious thing. And to miss this vaccine because of fake news, and to put yourself at risk of death, subhanAllah, it's just such a waste. And that's all I have to say. Zahack.
Thank you so much for adding such valuable information. I remember one incident from the life of Prophet ﷺ. I think he sent an expedition, and one Sahabi, he was infected with some disease, and if he would use water, he would die. So the people around him, they insisted that he should bath, he should take shower. And he took it and he died. So when this matter came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he heard about it and he said that you murdered him. So indeed, I mean, this situation is similar to that situation. People using their own opinions, their own views, and they're not keeping it to themselves. They're spreading it, and they're spreading it like a fact, an established fact. And this is really problematic. We would like to hear Dr. Shoaib about this.
You said doctor. I'm not a doctor, by the way.
Brother Shoaib.
Yeah, thank you. So on that point, by the way, I think we all within the medical profession, all of us are healthcare professionals. We've all seen stories like this, but we've also seen it on a personal level as well. And a lot of people will say that it's like the flu. And the flu affects people in the hundreds. This has affected people in the hundreds of thousands, millions, right? It's not like the flu. I had a similar case where somebody was admitted to hospital with COVID. His kidneys were weak because he had CKD, kidney failure. And what ended up happening was he died. And the children had been on holiday. Even though there was lockdown restrictions in the country, they had secretly gone around, on holiday. When they came back from their holiday with mixing, illegally mixing, because that wasn't allowed in the country, they were just, going through the backdoor routes to mix with each other. Their father, who had this kidney failure, ended up dying. And when I asked him, what did your father die of? He said, he died of kidney failure. He didn't die of COVID. He didn't die of COVID. And this was his guilt, He knew he died of COVID. And I said, what did he go in hospital with? He said he went in with COVID, but in the end, it was kidney failure that got him. And I didn't want to push him because it's his father, but what do you think COVID's going to do? You think it's going to become a hammer and hit you on the head, and that's how it's going to kill you? No, it's going to go after your organs, and it's going to it's going to cause organ damage, which is going to kill you. That's how it gets you. This idea that COVID is going to do something else. I mean, what else would it do? It's going into your body, right? And on another point, and just a couple of points I'll say before I wrap up. with regards to vaccination, and a lot of people have said, and I've seen many posts being shared, that in Islam, you can only take medicines when you are ill. In Islam, there is no concept of vaccinating. There is no concept of, taking something as a precaution. What are ajwa dates? 7 ajwa dates are taken by the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The person who takes 7 ajwa dates is protected from the effects of magic that day. That is a vaccine. You have taken these ajwa dates before being affected by magic to protect yourself from the magic. This is a precautionary step. This is exactly what a vaccine is. So these people who are saying this are completely jahil. No matter how much our community props them up, they don't know what they're talking about because they don't have the depth of knowledge. And another thing I'd like to borrow from Dr. Aqib, I'm sure he won't mind. Somebody shared a post, and these posts look really good. They, 10 out of 10 for how great they make the picture look. And it said, if the social distancing works, why the masks? And if the masks work, why the vaccine? Right? And everyone's like, oh wow, well done. This is such a clever point, and everyone's sharing it. And Dr. Aqib said back at that time, and it really made me laugh at the time, he said, if seat belts work in your car, if a seat belt works, why the airbag? And if the airbag works, why the traffic lights? The same concept there, that this is there to protect you. If this happens to fail for some reason, you have the airbag. If that happens to fail for whatever, you have these steps put in place. So what I would say as my closing remarks would be that just stop it. Before you push send on any message, before you put anything on Facebook, just stop, because you will have blood on your hands. You will face Allah. And I say this to people about much more minor things, about political things that they share with me all the time, about lying against countries or lying about people. You will face Allah, and you have to answer for your statements. But on this point where you may have caused somebody's death, you will answer to Allah for doing that. Why, as a non-medical professional, as a person who didn't know anything about the topic, why did you speak on that topic and cause somebody's death? That's a serious issue. No matter how much you try and dress it up as, oh, he died of heart failure, not really died of this or that. No matter how much you dress it up, you're going to have to be questioned for it and answer for it on the day of judgment. So before you push these forward messages, just stop and think. That's my closing remarks. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. I would like to add a funny point here. When this COVID thing started, people were talking about tawakkal Allah. They were saying that why mask, why this, why that, why vaccination? We need to have tawakkal on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I heard a lot of Indian, Pakistani TV anchors and TV speakers, they were shouting and yelling at the Saudi government that they have banned Umrah, they have banned Hajj. And they were speaking about that, and they say that these people are cowards, and they don't fear Allah, they fear a virus which is not visible. So when we talk about such stuff, now the vaccination is in the market, and they say, and now they are not talking about tawakkal, they are talking about Yahudi sazish and Jewish conspiracy and this and that stuff. And when this started first, they say that it wasn't China, right? So they say Chinese are the godless people, and they challenged Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now this is a kind of punishment on the Chinese people. And when it started to, spread in Iran, they say that this is Trump's conspiracy to fight Iran. So the Bechara Trump, he got accused of this. And then when it started spreading in America, they say that this is some kind of conspiracy. And people were talking about this and talking about that every time. And I think if we keep listening to these stuffs, and we're gonna end up in nothing. Jazakallah khair for your time.
Absolutely.
And
I'll add one point there. I mentioned earlier about dihydrogen monoxide. 100% of people who have consumed dihydrogen monoxide eventually die. Coming back to the water, right? H2O, water. Statistics can be twisted, right? Everybody who drinks water will die, right? Because we just died. It doesn't mean that caused that as well. And if you don't have that, if whoever's watching and they think if you don't have that understanding, just pause yourself, just stop before you forward something on.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for your time, especially Dr. Mazhar and Dr. Aqib and Brother Shoaib. He's not a doctor, but he spoke like a doctor. Jazakallah khair for your time. And I would advise the viewers that religion, Islam, is based on science, it's based on knowledge, it's based on rational thinking, it's based on logic. So we shouldn't be listening to any kind of stuff that is not based on logic, science, and knowledge. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.